Welcome, everybody, to the Heavenly View, where we talk hot topics from a world and Christian perspective. My name is Krissy Amos.
And my name is Hannah Hayes. We have an awesome show for you guys today. We have two very special guests. We have Vic Baker, who is our Republican State Committeeman for Volusia County. And we have Duncan DeMarsh, who is our Republican Vice Chairman of Volusia County. Welcome to the show, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Thank you guys so much for taking the time to come out and being here and representing our state and our counties. Vic, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how long have you been doing it?
Yeah, well, I started out in a little town called Hornell, New York, a railroad town where I was raised in a Presbyterian family. My grandfather was a World War I veteran, in fact, born in 1895. I was raised on old-fashioned values, Lawrence Welk on Saturday night, church on Sunday, Eagle Scout. Went off to college. Well, I've actually got my first radio job in Hornell, working for a radio station, a friend of my grandfather's owned, and started writing news, delivering news, and spinning records when I was in high school. Carried it on in college, got into radio, newspapers, and television, became a TV news reporter in 1975, and from that point forward was a producer, producing newscasts for many years, and then got into politics about 12 years ago when I came down here and retired early, and applied my communications skills and experience and my life experience as a faithful Christian to the work of the Republican Party. That's where we are.
Amen. That's awesome. And how? Tell us a little bit about the position that you're in.
Republican State Committeeman and Committeewoman in each county has one of each. We are representatives of the Republican voters of our counties to the state committee. We sit on the Republican State Committee, which makes policy, which takes positions on issues and candidates at times, and basically works to elect solid conservative Republicans. The chairman of the party, our chairman, is Marianne Pistilli. She is one of 67 county chairs who join us as a 3-member delegation. But our state committeemen and state committeewoman are elected by the Republican voters of the county, by the full electorate, whereas the chairman is elected by the people who are precinct committee leaders on the Republican Executive Committee, which has roughly 300 plus people right now. So it's a different method of election. We're elected every 4 years in presidential election years, where the committee chair is elected every 2 years after midterms and presidential years.
Awesome. How about you, Duncan? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and how long you've been doing it.
My name's Duncan DeMarsh. I'm a native of DeLand, Florida. I've lived here in Volusia County my whole life with the exception of 4 years where I went to Virginia for college. I was around 13 years old when I was first introduced to the local Republican Party. And the situation was my family is entrepreneurs. We're small-town, Main Street entrepreneurs, small business owners. All I ever wanted to do was follow in their footsteps. They own a regional chain of movie theaters, and I wanted to pop popcorn. I wanted to raise a family. I wanted to go to church on Sunday. I never had any political aspirations or really wanted to get involved. But when we opened our first location in my hometown, it was going to be our flagship movie theater, we were heavily abused by local governments. And I didn't know what my political philosophy was. I had never really watched Fox News. I'd never really read into the subject. But I saw what occurred that day, and I said, I don't want that to happen to anybody else. So I started going to community meetings, looking for who was there standing up for taxpayers, for small business owners, for faithful Christians. And I saw a guy, multiple individuals, but specifically one man named Tony Ledbetter, who was the chairman of the Volusia County Republican Party. And he was fighting to restore what I believe are traditional values to Volusia. Low taxes, a light approach to regulating business, to the values that I think made our country great, to allow businesses to grow. He was a faithful Christian. He was a staunch conservative. And I said, I want to join whatever he's a part of. So I got involved, and he directed me to different individuals like Vic Baker, who encouraged me to join Teenage Republicans. We accomplished a lot in Teenage Republicans. We became the largest club at the time in the nation. We won a lot of awards for many years. I went to college in Virginia, where I worked on campaigns. and I also attended on an ROTC scholarship. So I joined the Army. I'm in the Florida Army National Guard. And I came back and worked briefly on our now Governor Ron DeSantis' campaign, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was in a parking lot with two mentors of mine, Vic Baker and now Representative Chase Tremont. And they said, if Representative Chase Tremont gets elected and becomes a representative, he gets to hire an aide. Would you consider doing it? And the day after he got elected, I went to work for him, and that was 3 years ago. So I worked with him in the Florida House of Representatives as my day job, and then I serve as vice chair of the Volusia County Republican Party. Both of those positions are very special to me because the Gospel of Luke teaches us to whom much is given, much is required. This party, this community has given me so much, and I feel like every day I have the opportunity to give back, earn their trust, earn my keep. And so I want to do the best I can in both those roles.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It sounds a little bit like Charlie Kirk, too. Standing up for what's right, not being afraid to speak out, standing for conservative and biblical values.
I think we need 1 million Charlie Kirks. I had the opportunity to bring him to my campus, and if I can even get 1% closer to being him every day, I think that would be great. He's a hero of mine and to many.
Well, I think you're on your way there, Duncan.
Yes. Yes.
I know I've gotten the opportunity to meet you a few times at the Capitol through the Capitol Project. It's been awesome to be able to have the opportunity to go in and pray for some of our leaders in the state capitol. And we really appreciate everything that both of you guys are doing to help shape the values, really, to bring them back to a biblical standpoint. So, of course, everything is kind of crazy right now when it comes to government, all things government. So we are in what is like the longest shutdown, it seems.
Not yet. Almost.
Almost. It seems it. It feels it. We are in the midst of this government shutdown. We actually have a clip for you guys. And so we're going to play that right now, and then let's get into it.
Let me just point out, if I might, that we are 29 days into a Democrat shutdown. And the senator from New Mexico was absolutely right. SNAP recipients shouldn't go without food. People should be getting paid in this country. And we've tried to do that 13 times. You voted no 13 times. This isn't a political game. These are real people's lives that we're talking about. And you all have just figured out, 29 days in, that, there might be some consequences. There are people who run out of money. Yeah, we're 29 days in. And they've done their best to make sure that a lot of these programs are funded. But at some point, the government runs out of money.
That's right.
13 times people over here voted to fund SNAP. 13 times they voted to fund WIC. My aching back.
My aching back.
Well, when you get John Thune that angry, you've gone way too far. He is a stoic Midwesterner. He lost it. Now, I can say we call it the Schumer shutdown because it just deliberately is Schumer's creation. He himself is a hostage to AOC, Bernie Sanders, and the left, the radical lunatic wing of his party. Scared to death he'll be primaried, not this year, but in 28. Okay. His leadership is in jeopardy. Hakeem Jeffries' leadership is in jeopardy. These are two of the weakest, most mendacious, scurrilous legislative leaders I've ever seen on the floor of the House and Senate. They lie to your face with impunity. They don't even care that you fact check them and realize it. We owe a great debt of gratitude to Elon Musk for liberating Twitter, now X, from the imposition of censorship. We've just learned that the previous administration, not Biden himself, because he didn't know what pudding he was having that day, but the administration acting in his stead was spying, Jack Smith was spying on members of Congress and conservative MAGA Republicans. Charlie Kirk, Turning Point, they were worse than Watergate by 100-fold. And yet no accountability yet, because there's so much of a mess to clean up in Washington. It's going to take us a few years to untangle the Gordian knot. It's going to be untangled. It's going to happen. One layer at a time, we're going to unpeel it. It's going to happen. But I can tell you, these people on Capitol Hill, these members of Congress, it's a misnomer to say, well, give up your pay they can't do it because the Constitution, the 27th Amendment, was enacted to prevent any Congress from voting on its own pay. An election must intervene, and the next Congress would be affected. So they can't deny themselves pay by the Constitution. And if they can't get this passed, they certainly can't get the Constitution amended. The same thing for impeaching judges. If you can't get to 20 or 60 votes in the Senate to vote for a simple spending bill, the same as we've been spending, don't expect to get to 67 votes to convict a rogue judge. It's not going to happen. So let's be honest and reasonable here. It's going to take time to unravel this corrupt mess. The insider trading by members of Congress is outrageous. The amount of sexual escapades by members of Congress that get shoved under the rug and people paid off by taxpayer money, it's outrageous. The fact that Schumer and his cohorts think that they can simply use the misery of people dependent on government as leverage for their dire purposes is beyond scurrilous. These people are scoundrels. They're not words in the lexicon adequate to describe how evil they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I'll say about the shutdown, I went to school in Virginia, about 2 hours away from D.C., and there's a tremendously different culture in Northern Virginia, in that Beltway, D.C. environment, than what we're used to here. And I think a big solution, a long-term solution to all this confusion up there, all this corruption, everything that we see manifesting itself in Washington, D.C., is for us to take a little bit of our values, Florida values, Volusia County values, and to apply them to these national problems. Federalism, we're going to keep having shutdown fights. Republicans have rightfully forced a shutdown over the Obamacare issue. Democrats are now fighting this rearguard effort to try and hold off Donald Trump to protect what is their dying party. But these shutdown fights are going to continue. And they only hurt because people are so dependent on the federal government, because the federal government is so involved in our lives. If we applied a little 10th Amendment philosophy and restored power to the states and to our local governments, I believe the federal government could do all their crazy stuff, but it wouldn't really apply to us. We need to restore the power of our local governments. I trust our mayors here in Volusia County a lot more than I trust our congressmen, all the congressmen in Washington, D.C. I trust our governor to have sane policies in our Republican state legislature here in Florida to do things that would never lead to a government shutdown like this. Florida had its longest budget fight in its history last session. The legislative session was the second longest the state legislature has ever gone through. The only one that was longer was during Reconstruction. And they had fundamental disagreements about how they would fund the state government. And for almost 100 days, they battled it in and out. But Florida's method to solve these problems is so superior to the federal method. In the state of Florida, if they don't pass a budget, we revert to the past fiscal year. That's not only a sane approach to budgeting and to government, but it would actually lead to less government in the long run. So if you had a fiscal conservative state legislature and they were fighting against increased spending, if they were to try and push and block a budget from being passed, you'd immediately see a 4 or 5% restoration of taxpayer funding. So I believe it's good what Florida, the model we have, the line item veto, the 8-year term limit, a balanced budget amendment, and just our culture here of respecting the taxpayer, of respecting traditional values. If we applied that to Washington, D.C., I think we could solve a lot of problems.
Florida has to have a balanced budget. Our current governor and his predecessor reduced the amount of debt that Florida holds. They've under DeSantis, it's been cut in half. Florida is in a position where we don't need an income tax. We may soon be able to dispense with property tax, another onerous burden on many people on fixed incomes. Florida is looking to be the center of commerce for the world because pretty soon, if New York State and New York City in particular don't regain their sanity, they're going to elect
Yeah.
a communist as the mayor of the
Right.
capital city of capitalism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
24 years after 9/11,
Right.
a Muslim, a radical Muslim whose parents think America is horrible and whose father has compared Abraham Lincoln to an early inspiration for Hitler.
Mm.
I mean, the sacrilege is beyond belief, and so we here in Florida have some sanity imposed on us. We have occasionally some crazy things going on, but look what we've accomplished here. We managed to rein in the murder of babies in Florida. We haven't stopped it entirely, but it's a sane approach to it, so that we're not murdering young children. And I'm wandering around, but when I get to the point where they talk, Charlie Kirk was asked the question about how can you as a Christian support capital punishment. He said, well, there's at least 5 times in the Torah where it says a life for a life. It says if you take a life, the victim is not compensated until the other life is gone. And he said there's biblical basis for it. But the point is, when you talk about abortion, how can people lightly talk about aborting a baby, an innocent child, even a child of a rape? That child did not commit a rape. That child is a victim too. That child is not a criminal. That child committed nothing. It's an innocent child of God.
That's right.
But a criminal is not innocent. There's a difference. There is a difference. And as far as I understand, the translation is "thou shalt not murder,"
Yes.
not that "thou shalt not kill."
Amen.
One of the things that makes Florida great is our voters, but especially our political leaders, have been unafraid to use what I consider to be the most powerful word in the political language, and it's no. We had the courage, despite an overwhelming funding advantage that the left had on 2 major constitutional amendments last election, Amendment 3 and 4. Florida's voters had the courage to say no to widespread legalized, super-powered marijuana on every corner that would have enriched a select group of trial attorneys who would have used that to litigate everything in the state. And we had importantly, we set the tone for the example. We led the nation. Florida led on the issue of life when we said no to late-term taxpayer-funded abortion in the Amendment 4 question. Governor DeSantis has learned that there's a lot of pressure on your political leaders. People always come to you and ask to spend more taxpayer money, to regulate this industry or that, to compromise your values, to give in today so you can have power tomorrow. What he's been unafraid to do, what Donald Trump has been unafraid to do since he came down that escalator in 2015, is to say no. And sometimes that's the most important thing you can do.
Yeah.
You cannot be charitable with other people's money. You can't tax your way into prosperity. You can't give up generational values and try and rewrite society to make it a better place. Governor DeSantis and Donald Trump have led by example, is when they say no to these government programs, when they say no to this liberal agenda, they're saying yes to us.
Yes.
They're saying yes to good, hardworking families, to parents, to taxpayers, to live their dreams, to create businesses, to go to church, to worship their God, and to lead their own lives. So I'd like to see the federal government say no to a lot more things so that we can say yes to our own endeavors.
We've forgotten what happened in summer of last year, July 13th, when by a whisker, by a sliver, by less than a centimeter, a bullet missed blowing up the brain of Donald Trump. People say, oh, he got nicked in the ear. Oh, if he had turned his head, it would have been different. I don't know about you, but I know that the hand of God turned his head.
Absolutely.
I see the hand of God. Donald Trump knows the hand of God turned his head. In fact, ever since then, Donald Trump has been a different man. Donald Trump is not a king. He knows who the king is.
Yeah.
You know who the king is.
Yeah.
I do. And that king is eternal. And that king was a perfect man, the only perfect man. Donald Trump, though, also knows this. He's got 3.5 years left to fix a lot of the chaos and despair and destruction and ruination that has been imposed on this country by by people with no conscience and no soul, by people with no moral compass and no guidance, people who are just merely flooding this nation with illegal immigrants because they declare it's an act of kindness. It's not an act of kindness. It's an act of suicide to invite criminals into your home. That's what they've done. Why? So that they can win elections? That's why. So their whole goal is simply to win elections. They have stolen. They tried to steal the 2016 election, got caught off guard. They succeeded in stealing the 2020 election with help from nefarious hidden hands. They did. And they called us conspiracy theorists, but we were right all along. And now they also tried to kill 2024 and basically take that away from us. They tried to kill Trump. They tried to impeach Trump. They tried to convict Trump. They tried to sue him into bankruptcy, but he's prevailed. Why has he prevailed? I can tell you why he prevailed.
Because he's got God on his side.
Because God has ordained this man to lead this nation.
Yes.
And he's going to lead us into prosperity and a golden age. Look what he just did overseas. A masterstroke of diplomacy. While these people at home are playing political games with people's life. The other thing about these food stamps and other things, people say, I'm going to rob a Walmart if you don't give me my benefits. It's not your benefits. They're taxpayer dollars.
Right.
It's the largesse of other taxpayers helping you out. We've got to get away from this culture of dependency and tell people, this is your call to step up and go apply for a job. That person on the street corner holding the homemade cardboard sign begging for your money should instead be walking into a Walmart or a Walgreens or any place else and say, I would like a job.
And we do actually have we have like labor boards and stuff that people can go to. I remember a time whenever my husband and we had first gotten married, we got pregnant right away. And, we were just kids, and we went through a tough time financially. And my husband, sure enough, got up 4:00 in the morning and went down. He had a lot of knowledge on how to do different things in construction and stuff like that. And he showed up there at the labor board 4:30 in the morning because he was going to do whatever it took to provide for his family. And, you guys were talking a lot about the budgeting and how Florida's got it together when it comes to that. So can you guys explain a little bit for those that maybe don't watch the news all the time, even though they may not be getting the correct information anyways there? Can you talk a little bit about what are the Democrats asking for in this that's causing this whole shutdown? What is it that they want us to do as Republicans so that they can get their way, or what is it that they want? Can you explain a little bit the nitty-gritty of the shutdown?
Duncan will fill in the blanks for me if I miss something. It's $1.5 trillion of goodies that they want. They want to restore funding for NPR and public and PBS. That's $500 million there. They want $200 billion to restore health coverage for illegal aliens. They want to pay for LGBTQ and other whatever letters you want to use programs in places like Rwanda around the world. They want all sorts of ridiculous lefty schemes funded again. It's not going to happen.
Right.
It's like they're holding a gun to the head of Lady Liberty and say, give me the 1.5 trillion or I shoot. It's extortion. There is no compromise on something like that. The one big beautiful bill took all that stuff out. They're trying to just hammer us into putting it back in. Here's the difference. You just said it. You nailed it, Duncan. Donald Trump has brought a word to the lexicon that the Republican Party had forgotten for many, many years. No.
And it's a full sentence.
And the truth is, with the Democrats, especially the Democrats in Washington, D.C., there is no number. It's never enough. The taxpayers are an infinite piggy bank that they will beat every dollar out of. Hardworking families have money problems. The federal government, our local governments, are not the only people who are individuals, organizations who are income constrained. Families are really struggling. But too many politicians, unfortunately in both parties, view taxpayer funding as an infinite resource that they can just come back to and back to. They can raid our coffers to pay for our pet programs. One thing Vic said that was very important, he brought up the near assassination of President Trump. As we know, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. That was one of the best things I've heard about how God really does govern in the affairs of men. We believe that is truth. What Vic said is the truth. If you went and said that in a college campus or taxpayer-subsidized college campuses, if you went and said that on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives, you'd be laughed off the stage. They fundamentally do not believe that God is involved in our society, and we do. Benjamin Franklin stood up at the Constitutional Convention. They could not find a compromise. They could not find an agreement. He was so elderly at the time that he had only spoken to excuse himself to use the restroom. He had to be carried in by 4 prisoners on a special device just to get him in there. But he rose to his feet and told the assembled delegates a very powerful phrase. He said, "I have lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing truths I see that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall without his notice, how then can a great nation rise without his aid?" We recognize here in Volusia County, in the state of Florida, that we are an ordained nation, that we are called to do great things. They do not recognize that in D.C. They don't recognize that in the schools that are raising our children. And so I think a lot of these budget issues, any of these issues, stem from a fact that we are disconnected with the founding principles that made us great, faith in God. If we restore that, we can really fix a lot of these problems.
Yeah, that reminds me also of scripture. You know, Americans can see what's going on, and I believe that we're at a point where we've woken up and are continuing to wake up. And the word says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways, then I will pour out my spirit. I will open up heaven. He will be in our affairs, and he will go. And I believe that's why we have Trump as a president right now who recognizes Jesus as king.
Come on.
And you know, as far as, you know, you were talking, Duncan, about our Florida government here and how with the fiscal year that if we can't decide on a vote that we go back to so in the government in DC, why is it not the same?
Our Constitution does not hold such requirements of our Congress as currently constituted. Certainly a constitutional amendment could correct this. Balanced budget amendment would be one thing. Term limits would be one thing. But you're expecting Congress to enact something that is not in their interest. Right now, a good many of them, more than I would like to see, are engaged in insider trading. They get wealthy. They don't have any wealth coming in, and all of a sudden they're worth $3, $4, $5, $10 million. Pelosi, I think hundreds of millions. Where did that money come from? Well, it came from insider trading, inside information, and knowing where the levers can be pulled, and telling your husband or whatever else does your fund, put some money into this, put some money into that, because you know what's coming. Well, Martha Stewart, did she not go to prison for that? She did. Okay, so it's a two-tiered system, and we need to get back. I want to get back to faith a little bit. You talked about the faith. I think one thing that's important, we're speaking here on the 30th of October last night at Ole Miss, a packed stadium of 13,000 or 14,000 people, saw Erica Kirk speak. And she has spoken rarely. She spoke it when her husband was given the posthumous Medal of Freedom. She spoke, of course, at his memorial. She entreated them all to stand up for what they believe, to be courageous in their faith. That was Charlie's favorite line, have courage in your faith. Have courage. The other thing is the candidates for office and politicians who hold office. I think the voters are getting a little smarter at this because the media has cloaked a lot of this, but we have access to real information through X and platforms, independent platforms that are getting us the truth about the streets of Portland and Chicago and other things going on. So we're not exactly being manipulated quite as well. Authenticity.
Yes.
A candidate must not try to portray himself or herself as something he or she is not.
Right.
So when you're running for Attorney General of Virginia and say you're going to uphold the law, but yet you have been privately texting about your fantasies of murdering a political adversary and watching his children die in their mother's arms,
Wow.
you've disqualified yourself from any responsible public office. And how can any Democrat, because he's still polling at roughly 40% in the polls, how can anybody think about voting for somebody like that just because he's got a Dion in front of his name? Or how can, for instance, the NAACP endorse the white woman versus the black Jamaican Marine Corps immigrant, legal immigrant, perfectly competent lieutenant governor? The NAACP never endorses whites over blacks, and this time they did. Why? Because there's a D in front of the name of the woman who won't disassociate herself from the Attorney General who fantasized about murdering political opponents and watching their children die. But then in New York, we've got this communist who says, just trust me, I'm going to make everything free. What did Margaret Thatcher say about socialism? The problem with that is socialism is eventually, not very long after, you run out of other people's money. You cannot do it. It does not work. And New York City is the bastion of capitalism and free enterprise in the world. What's going to happen is Florida is going to be invested in the role that Wall Street once had. I wouldn't be surprised if you lose your financial sector in New York entirely. New York will be a shell of its former self, and we're going to have New York looking like London. A warning to New Yorkers, but they're not listening to us. But hopefully, despite the math of a three-way race, the plurality goes by a fluke to somebody other than Mamdani. We are in a spiritual reawakening, but the filling of the void is going to be painful for us, and that requires courage, authenticity, and vision, and understanding that Donald Trump is not a perfect man. There are no perfect men. Right. No perfect women. God doesn't work with perfect people. He works with those. My wife used to say, you go to church, you're a church leader, why do you get so much done in the church? Because I said, because I'm not perfect. The church helps me deal with that. That's what the church is for. It's not for perfect people.
Yeah.
It's for flawed people.
Yeah.
So, Duncan, tell me, how long what does all this shutdown stuff mean for America? And how long can this go on before we are really, because just like you said in that video, we're eventually going to run out of money. So how long can we keep this up before things really go awry? And what does this really mean for America being under this shutdown for so long?
I firmly believe that the tide is really turning in favor of President Trump on this shutdown issue. People are waking up. There's millions of service members out there who were thankfully paid thanks to the ingenuity of President Trump reaching out to the Mellon family to cover their paychecks. But that can't last forever. There's spouses of service members who are going to social media, calling their representatives and asking for some sanity from the Democrat Party. President Trump holds the cards, but we can't compromise and allow them to fund illegal immigrants' health care. We can't allow them to restore taxpayer funding to the ultra-liberal national NPR. If NPR is so great, and if left-wing Americans like it so much, they should donate their own money and pay subscriptions, and it should exist on the free market. I don't need to cover its biased broadcasting. Fundamentally, though, this is really going to come to a head in the midterm elections. If we don't stand up and issue a clarion call across the country for President Trump and his program, if we don't send a Republican supermajority, and not just Republicans, but a conservative supermajority who are willing to fight on behalf of the president, on behalf of the American people, these games will unfortunately continue. We must punish the Democrats for this behavior, for holding up the checks of our service members, for putting vulnerable people and shutting down the government. We have to stand with President Trump, and the way we make our voices heard is by organizing now and electing conservative Republicans at all levels of government.
Mm. So things could get real ugly real quick.
Yeah.
Well, they already have, and they're going to continue. But I do believe they're going to run out of rope pretty soon. I would say by the middle of this coming week, we're going to see them buckle. There's no way. And here's this, once again, if Republicans always knuckle under, as they have in the past, we keep losing.
Right.
We keep losing ground. They keep gaining ground. Donald Trump is the first one to say, as you've said, the word no. It's not going to happen. And because he has been firm, the Congress has been firm. They've said there's nothing to negotiate. There is nothing to negotiate. Do you negotiate with somebody that puts a gun to your head? No, of course you don't. Somebody who's holding a hostage? That's not our policy to negotiate with terrorists, is it? No. So you don't. You say no. Put down your gun and we'll talk. But Obamacare is a Ponzi scheme. It's an absolute fraud. It's never been affordable. If you don't have those tax credits shoring it up, then you have no coverage. So here's the thing. With it going up 200, 300, 400% in premiums, even with the tax credits, there's nobody working or otherwise who can afford Obamacare. And who gets rich on Obamacare? The insurance carriers. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing as when you feed student loans to universities, they jack up the tuition. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing when you give easy mortgages to people. The banking industry goes belly up as they did in 2008. When you do that with healthcare, the same thing. What you're doing is you're funding behavior, avarice and greedy behavior that makes the system impossible to function. Because greed drives it. Hospitals drive up prices. You know, when they get incentives to say you died of COVID, they say you died of COVID. So what is COVID? COVID is the flu with a federal grant. They're incentivized to say things that aren't true.
You're not wrong.
Now, you said something. You said that you believe that into next week that the government will reopen. Why do you believe that?
Because they're running out of time. There's no the welfare recipients. 1 in 8 Americans is getting food stamps. 1 in 8.
Wow.
And most of that stuff, they're not even legal Americans. Mm-hmm. They're getting free food. When that dries up, guess what else is going to happen? More self-deportations and more people not sending money overseas. Because those food stamps don't cover food. They cover all kinds of things, getting your nails done, buying cigarettes, because they black market out what they draw out for the, they find ways to cheat the system. Let's say, ask yourself this question. We provide free school lunches for kids, sometimes free school breakfast for kids, and we're also giving food stamps to the parents? Wait a minute. We're paying for it twice. It makes no sense. Nobody has the courage to stand up and say, wait a minute, this is insanity. Mm-hmm. What are we really funding here? We're not paying to help people. We're paying to rob the taxpayers for silliness, and the old expression, Habitat for Humanity. I was involved with Habitat for Humanity. I love the expression. When you don't give a house to the family, you build the house with the family. Yes. You don't give the man a fish, you teach the man how to fish, mm-hmm. and then you don't have to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. That's why welfare is such a bad thing. It just disables people into thinking they can just sit home and receive. That's not how to live your life. God doesn't call us to do that. Mm-hmm. God calls us to go out, venture out, and do for others.
Well, it says if you don't work, you don't eat.
Yes.
Correct.
That's what the Word of God says.
Correct.
And Duncan, I think you had something you wanted to add to that too.
Well, fundamentally, I think we have a government run by addicts. Maybe they're addicted to other things, but they're addicted to spending other people's money. They view it as a form of charity. When they deliver appropriations back to their district from Washington, it might be worthwhile, but they get a certain high from that. They arrive with a giant check, people applaud them, they put their names on municipal buildings, and they become addicted to spending other people's money.
And it's not their money.
It's
Right.
not.
It's your money.
Yeah.
It's our
Yeah.
hard-earned taxpayer dollars, oftentimes from working families. They use this myth that billionaires will pay for all these programs. The burden falls on us, the everyday working people, the small-town, Main Street businesses. It becomes harder to live our lives because politicians get kicks from funding these various programs, from spending money they don't have. And the most pernicious type of this spending is deficit spending. When they borrow money and tax future generations, unborn, not even my generation, but unborn Americans, to pay for these trillions of dollars of spending programs that we can't afford. They're risking the livelihoods, risking the liberty of untold generations of Americans because they cannot live within their means. It's very destructive to our country. They should go to some kind of Shopaholics Anonymous class and definitely not be in government.
Right.
Well, I know you talked about Elon Musk and you talked about Doge, and Florida kind of adopted Doge
Yes,
too,
it's
right?
going
So
on.
now we have that here. So now we're doing the same thing. We're going through and finding out where all the fat is and where all the frivolous spending is here on a state level. Do you look to
Not just the
see
state
more
level.
states?
We're talking
doing
municipal
this?
level too. We're talking city governments. For instance, do you need one more park? Do you need one more bike trail? Do you need one more this or concert hall or one thing or another? Or do you want to fund this play with drag queens or one thing or another? You know, all this sort of thing. Does the taxpayer money need to be spent for that? I mean, these are things they're looking at. And they're saying, wait a minute, you're expropriating the money from my home, my house. Basically, you as an elected official have decided that we have, let's say we have 50,000 homes in Volusia County, right? Single-family homes, people own, right? And they think that's 50,000 ATMs where they can just go out and draw out money whenever they want, right? Oh, your home's worth 10,000 more, so we'll just take more money out of you. That's not how this works. That's not taxing a realized asset. You're living in the house. You may live in the house until you die, unless you get taxed out of it. So the governor is pushing rightly in this state, and a lot of people support this. I certainly do. The concept that property taxes are an archaic method of taxation, dating back to the medieval times of kings of England, when the shire reeve would come. The sheriff was the shire reeve, which would be the guy that came and collected taxes on your property. You didn't own anything. The king owned everything. Well, it's kind of the same concept here. Do you ever really own your house? And we believe in the American dream, owning your own home. Well, do you own your home if you got to pay $2,000, $3,000 in a chunk to the county, the city, the whatever? And let's look at the school budgets. They get outrageously expensive. The amount of money we spend per pupil is outrageous. Are we getting our bang for the buck? Are we really spending the money on stuff that we really need? Or do we have a whole bunch of programs that somebody's invented because they know they can tap the ATMs, all those ATMs in the county? They can just take that money and expropriate it from you and use it for whatever they want. So we need to separate, as the Bible teaches us, separate your wants from your needs. God will provide for your needs, won't he?
Yeah,
Yes.
he will.
He won't always provide for your wants. Sometimes you pray and the answer is no.
That's
or
right.
maybe next week, or maybe next year, or maybe never. The point is, you got to understand, there are two kinds of things, and the world does not owe you a living. You owe God a good life because he made you.
Local governments, state government, the federal government does not have a revenue problem. They have a spending problem.
Correct.
And to paraphrase Ronald Reagan, I would say Democrats or local governments or state governments spend money like drunken sailors, but that would be insulting to drunken sailors.
Correct.
There really is a fundamental problem. So Florida has stood up two initiatives. The first was the state-level DOGE, which was under the governor's office, which began auditing local governments and pointing out massive examples of wasteful expenditures. Then the new CFO, Blazin Golia, a former state senator and former chairman of the Republican Party of Florida, was appointed, and he's begun a roadshow across the state, pointing out tremendous examples of misplaced and mismanaged taxpayer dollars. The property tax is very pernicious, especially for my generation. I understand that local governments have serious concerns about how they would live without it. But I don't think the benefit of explanation should fall on the taxpayers seeking to keep more of their money. The burden of explanation should fall on the local governments who continue to take more and more from hardworking Americans, from seniors on a fixed income, and we can't afford it anymore. They should explain why they need the property tax. I shouldn't have to explain to them how I propose getting rid of it. It is a tax on unrealized gains. If you own the home, you're living in the home, they're asking for income that the property is not generating for you. You never truly own your home with a property tax. You're always paying rent to some local government, some school board. It destroys the concept of property rights in America. And then fundamentally, we're getting to a point in our lives where it's never enough. Every year, every election, governments ask for more and more, and there's going to be a breaking point. We have to shift the mentality to where we say in the state of Florida that they need to explain to us where this money is going. And these transparency efforts like that the chief financial officer is running in Florida DOGE, I think is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, we need to shed light on it. John D. Rockefeller, the famous oil millionaire, multimillionaire, probably a billionaire he would have been in this day and age, right? Was asked the question, how much money is enough? His answer was, just a little more. And that's what government is always saying. Well, we just need just a little, just another taste of your money. Look, people on Social Security, they get maybe this year it's going to be 2.8% increase. Okay. Well, your taxes likely go up that much or more, Homestead properties have some degree of protection, but the point is, it's always a little bit more, and that school tax is a big part of it. Well, then they're saying, and I've talked to some mayors, they'll say, well, what do we do about police and fire and sewers and water? I said, well, where I live in New Smyrna Beach, I already pay a monthly fee for my water and sewer. That's paid for. My electric bill's part of it too. My garbage pickup's part of it too. That's covered. Okay, done. That's not a tax. Separate, right? Police and fire, yes, and emergency services need to be funded. Florida is a huge tourist state. 40% of all sales taxes collected in Florida are paid by tourists. So that's a broader base paying, and it's not as onerous. An extra penny or two on a sales tax is nowhere near as onerous. It's thousands of dollars on your home every year. People can manage it. Plus, you can put a lid on how much a big purchase would take in property tax. You could put a transfer tax on the sale or purchase of real estate property, one time, just like you do with anything, sales tax. There are ways of doing this. They're going to figure out the math. And once they figure out the math, they'll do it. But the important thing to say to these lawmakers is just do what's right. Find the numbers that work and then do what's right and fair for everybody. Yes, we need to take care of public safety. Yes, we need to take care of infrastructure. Our roads need to be maintained. Our sewer systems need to be maintained. Our parks need to be maintained. We need to have something there for people. But are some things the government is doing at our expense worth doing with taxpayer money? Or should the private sector be taking that on,
Right.
We have a well-endowed museum, the Hyatt C.C. Brown Museum Complex in Daytona Beach. A billionaire family has been very generous to this community. There are people of wealth in this community who've been very successful. Let's work together, private sector, public sector, and fill in the gaps where they need to be filled. But let's not always look at the poor taxpayer, grandma on her fixed income, to pick up the tab. I think it's time for us to do the moral thing and stop robbing people's homes.
So what's something that our listeners could do? Say there's people who never get involved in politics, who have opinions but just never get involved, never watch the news, what's going on, but they see this show. What's something that they could do to get involved, to help with what's going on?
We live in an age of technology. It's no longer difficult to reach out to your elected officials. You can reach them by email. You can go online and find their email addresses. If they don't read the emails, their staff does. Duncan will tell you. He's a staffer for a state lawmaker. He's read plenty of emails.
Lots of emails, I'm sure.
Maybe text messages as well. And there are ways of contacting. You also have social media where you can voice your opinion on the appropriate groups. You can directly contact these people on X. They all have Twitter or X handles. You can actually directly address them on X by just using their handle and sending them a message directly. In fact, many of them get their messages so much from X, they respond very quickly to that sort of thing. So those are the ways you can do it, but just stand up. Go to meetings, speak up, don't be afraid. Be not afraid. Isn't that what we're called to do? Be not afraid, for I'm with you. The Lord is with you. If you speak the truth, infused by the Holy Spirit, you have no fear. You have no apology. There needs to be no surrender, no retreat, because if you know what's right, then you stand for it. Now, we can make mistakes, but if we're speaking from the heart, no need to apologize for that.
Yeah. I think about the word that says that my people perish for lack of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we are seeing people educate themselves more now than ever before with all of the craziness and the chaos that's going on around us in our cities, in our state, and in our country. But definitely, I encourage all of you guys that are out there listening, like, especially if you're Christian, like, I don't know if you understand, but like, we make up, 60% of the population, but what percentage of us are actually getting out there and going to the polls? Mm-hmm. What is the percentage of us that's actually educating ourselves on policy, on the leaders that are stepping up for these positions? And even with our school board and everywhere else, we're not educating ourselves on the judges. We focus a lot on who's going to be the next president, maybe who's going to be our next governor, right? But we're not paying much attention to any of the other positions within the civic arena. And I think, to encourage those that are listening, like, you need to get involved by educating yourself first on who these people are, what they're doing, where their heart's at, what they represent, because we put our head in the sand so much for so long. And now we're at a position where, like, oh man, the world's in turmoil. How'd we get this way? Well, because we sat on our hands and we didn't do anything for so long, and we just kind of gave all these things away, right? Because the enemy is placed in our head that we have to be separate. We have to separate our government and our Christianity. We have to separate the two, right? Separate church and state. I hear that all the time. My husband and I just went to a conference, a Liberty Pastors conference, where they are educating pastors and other leaders, Christians of today. They're educating them to say, no, God created the government from the very beginning. It's right here all laid out for you in the Word of God. We stepped out of that. We gave the enemy authority in this arena. But if we have the Holy Spirit in us, same Holy Spirit that raised Christ from the dead, then we can be empowered to take it back. And so people have got to start educating themselves. They got to start learning more about policy. They got to start learning about what these representatives are standing for, so that we can actually see the change, go to the polls, vote for these people that are Bible-believing, men and women of God who are going to stand on biblical principle. And we'll start seeing our country change back to how God originated it to start with.
Our founders knew that our rights come from God.
That's right.
They said we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. That means nobody can take them away. God has endowed us. So they knew that in their hearts of hearts. Now, they might not have been all purely traditional Christians. Some were theists and had different approaches to it. They all believed in God, though. They believed in a Creator. Because without that central compass, we are adrift. We have no moral compass. We have no way of knowing your truth, my truth. No, there's only one truth.
Yes.
That's right.
There's only one truth. And so, yes, you're right. But the other thing I would say is we live in a modern age. I started out working in television when we would cut film. We'd shoot film, and go and get it, developed and all that. Then we went to videotape. Then we went to pure digital. Then we went to satellites. We had cell phones. We have the internet. We have so much information at our fingertips. You have the entire Holy Bible in your pocket with the phone, right? And the works of Shakespeare, who may not have been Shakespeare, might have been the Earl of Oxford who wrote it instead of Shakespeare. The point is, It's all in your pocket. All the knowledge. But where's the wisdom?
Mm-hmm.
That was the message that Charlie Kirk brought. And I talked about, he evoked two examples. I mean, first Christ, inspired by Christ, but informed by Socrates. And what has Socrates said? The smart man understands that he truly knows nothing. That's why he would spend his time asking questions of people and taking the logic or illogic of their arguments and putting them in a corner so they realize, oh, I'm wrong. You're right, it's over here. God is eternal, and we are simply looking in a mirror dimly.
Yeah.
St. Paul said the same thing about it,
Mm-hmm.
Same kind of concept. Reality is there. God is there around all of this, but we're living kind of, our eyes are clouded and we don't really fully understand it. I just had cataract surgery, so I don't use glasses anymore, except when I have to read, But the point is, it's remarkable that all of a sudden things aren't cloudy anymore. I'm seeing more clearly, and I can see clearly now. That song, right? It's people need wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
We've got all the knowledge in the world at our fingertips. We need wisdom, and now artificial intelligence is coming into play, and. You know what it's true
that's
about?
Kind of scary.
What's true about that is true from the very beginning. With a newscast, putting in a garbage in, garbage out.
Mm-hmm. And what the word says that wisdom is, it says it is, wisdom is, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord.
Correct.
And the word also says, how do we gain wisdom? That we ask our Father who will generously lavish it upon us.
Mm-hmm.
So he's the one that we get wisdom from, because there is like an earthly wisdom, but Solomon talks about that'll do no good, the earthly wisdom, but the wisdom from heaven is the one that we ask our Father for. He lavishes it upon us, and then we're able to see things we weren't able to see. We're able to hear things we weren't able to hear. People come in our path that we should have never crossed paths with, So
The cry of a baby, the whimper of a puppy, the majesty of a mountain, the roar of the ocean, the fear that you get from hearing a thunderstorm. It shows the power of God's creation. Everything intricately designed to work with each other. Everything works together. Everything is, you can't tell me there's no God, that this all happened at random. None of this happens at random. It's all been by design. We are all part of a plan. We don't know the end game, but we know we have to try to point in that direction for guidance, because as the wisdom, that's what we are all here to seek. Not knowledge. Knowledge, yes, you can get all the knowledge you want. Kids can go on the computer and find out anything they want. They can ask AI to write their term paper for them. But can they learn to be a wise and kind and faithful man or woman? Can they learn that from AI? No.
Right.
You learn that from God. God provides that to us. And it infuses you. When it infuses you, know it's there. Byron Donalds told the story about how he found Christ at a Cracker Barrel.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
You
that's
heard
a
the
great
story,
story.
right?
Yeah.
He all of a sudden felt the urge, and he ran out to a van full of Christians and asked them, I'm born again. I want to be born again. Accept Christ. And he did. And it changed his life.
And that's our endorsement for our next governor of Florida, correct? Byron Donalds. He's been endorsed by Donald Trump as our next
Donald
governor.
Trump has endorsed him. The Republican Party has not officially endorsed yet.
My employer, Representative Chase Tremont, a local pastor and our state representative, has endorsed him as well. And I think he, if elected, which I think he is likely to be the front runner, would be a courageous governor for the state of Florida. One thing I wanted to say, which Byron Donalds has a financial background, why does these financial matters, which we talked about a lot today, it kind of sounded like Milton Friedman was the guest on your show with the two of us combined. Why do these financial matters, why does taxing and spending matter for Christians? Fundamentally, there's an issue about affordability for family formation, for the strength of the traditional family, which is the strength of this nation. We need to be able to afford to live in this country. That's important. I think we all recognize that to an extent. Vice President Vance talks about affordability, how it's important to have children. Charlie Kirk talked about this. But all the left-wing activities that we had to fight against in the Biden and the Obama administration, the way to counter that, the way to stop the political persecution of pro-lifers, the way to stop the indoctrination in the schools, the way to stand up against this LGBT nonsense that is often taxpayer funding is through the power of the purse.
Mm-hmm.
So you might say as a Christian, it's perhaps a little left-wing on, maybe you're left-wing on spending issues. You want to be charitable. You want to help the poor. You have to realize that the vast majority of these government programs that are eroding the Christian and moral foundation of our country can be stopped only if we recall the spending, if we hold the line, if we say no, and we stop utilizing taxpayer dollars like they're an infinite resource. The power of the purse, fundamentally, education is important. Courage is important on these moral issues. We have to be messengers of it like Charlie Crist is. But we cannot stand up on our own. Our individual churches will be overwhelmed by the taxpayer-funded resources of the left if we don't hold the line and recognize that there is a purpose to taxpayer-funded programs, but we have to make sure they're doing just the traditional role of government. If we can cut off the funding streams for these left-wing programs, we have a real fighting chance at saving our nation.
Praise God.
Yeah.
Well, I want to really just thank you guys both again for coming and sharing the wealth of wisdom and knowledge that you guys have with all of our listeners. I want all of you guys to know that our they hit it on the head the whole time. You know, Jesus is number one.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to be number one in our life. So if he's not number one in your life, make him number one today. If you have any questions or comments of anything, please reach out to us because we'd love to talk more about you, pray with you, walk you down this beautiful life of Christianity. And we just really want to empower you guys to really get involved, to educate yourself, learn about who these people are, and just take a stand and get out to the polls and vote. And we just thank all of you guys for listening. We thank you again, Vic, and we thank you again, Duncan, for being a part and all the hard work that you guys do. You guys make sure you guys are commenting, and subscribing. Share with your friends so that the word gets out and we create more content just like this. We just love you guys so much. Thank you so much for listening and taking the time. And we'll see you next time for another episode, new guests, hot topics right here on
The Heavenly View.
Bye, guys.